Hi, welcome to Coaster Mania. I'm Micah, and today I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions on Cedar Point. Cedar Point is America's roller coaster. Well, it is according to their announcements that go on every half hour or so. More on that later. Make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on our latest uploads. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on this park down in the comments below and whether or not you agree with me. Enjoy! This park was the second park that Katie and I visited together, and certainly plays a role in our opinions on the rest of the parks we visited together so far. We spent roughly 3.5 days at the park, giving us more than enough of a chance to experience most of what this park has to offer. This park is located in Sandusky, Ohio, on a peninsula right on Lake Erie. In fact, on a really clear day, if you look to the north, you may even be able to see the coast of Canada. This park had 17 coasters at the time of our visit and was opened originally all the way back in 1870. One of those coasters was torn down and the other is currently closed. Similar to my previous park review, I'm breaking this one up into 10 sections. I'll go through my thoughts on the first impressions, theming, immersion, layout, amenities, food, staff, coasters, flat rides, and finally, operations. To tie everything together, I will give my overall thoughts on the park and average out the scores. Similar to Kings Island, Katie and I did not visit the attached water park, so I won't be including that in the review. Section 1. First Impressions. It is honestly a bit difficult to wrap my head around this park. It almost feels like it shouldn't exist. It sits on a peninsula surrounded by water on all sides. It feels like the beaches in California in a way, at least during summer, but it's smack dab at the top of Ohio. I don't understand how two of the arguably best theme parks in the US both simultaneously reside in this state. And no offense, Ohio, but other than these two places in football, you've got corn, that hell is real sign, more corn, and well, yeah, that's all I can think of. Anyways, Cedar Point provides for this almost monstrous feeling when approaching it. You first drive up a long road with nothing but water on either side of it. This whole time you can see the park in the distance as it grows to fill your field of view. All of the coasters in the park look absolutely massive. Once you hit the front entrance, you're graced by gatekeepers soaring over you through its iconic keyholes. The only minor complaint I have about the front entrance of this park is how corporate it feels. While not a big issue, especially when you get past this part, the design of it does feel a bit uninspired to me. Overall, I'd rate the first impressions of this park a 10 out of 10. Section 2. Theming. The theming at Cedar Point in some areas is fairly decent. Similar to a park like Kings Island, there are sections of the park where theming is not bad, but then there are sections where the theming is not very thorough. One of the best areas of the park is the Wild West area near Maverick and Steel Vengeance. The facades of the buildings as well as the general aesthetic do make for a decent representation of a Wild West town. One of the sections connected to this area feels like an old American courtyard from the colonial times. These two areas are pretty good, but beyond that, there isn't much else to say. This isn't to say that the park is unattractive. A lot of it just has fairly generic theming. There are some fun Easter eggs in the park, like this one outhouse that responds to you when you pull on the door, but other than that, there's really not much. So overall, I'd give the theming a 7 out of 10. Section 3. Immersion. Immersion is always going to be a very subjective thing. I'd say that Cedar Point does do a fairly good job at keeping you immersed. You're there to ride some of the best coasters out there, and it provides. The fact that this park sits on a peninsula means that you have water on all sides, meaning that a lot of the distractions that might take you out of the experience at other parks aren't present here. There are some coasters like Iron Dragon that give you a decent view into certain maintenance areas within the park, which does kinda detract from the experience a bit, but overall I'd give the immersion of Cedar Point an 8 out of 10. Section 4. Layout. Cedar Point is laid out in a fairly simple manner, but it makes traversing the park take quite a while sometimes. Near the front entrance, there is a long, straight section of path, and then the rest of the park is laid out in an elongated oval. This park is huge. Walking from the front entrance to the very back of the park can take quite a while, and I highly recommend wearing comfortable shoes if you plan on going here. I almost got the sense that things almost felt overwhelming when coming here on the first day. When you're in the park, everywhere you look is a coaster. Getting around to each coaster is easy, and it didn't ever feel like we had to go off the beaten path to find what we wanted to ride. Something that does kind of help this park is the transport options. From the front of the park, you can hop on a gondola and get a nice scenic view of the boardwalk area. This takes you to the end of the boardwalk area and is not too far from one of the stations for the train ride, which can take you to the very back of the park. Overall, the layout is fairly simple and very easy to navigate. I'd rate the layout a 9 out of 10. Section 5, Amenities. This is where things start to slip a little bit. When it comes to amenities, Cedar Point is a bit of a mixed bag. There are plenty of drink stands and lockers and restrooms, but there is one major complaint I have in relation to one of those things: the drink stalls. So far, at every other Cedar Fair park Katie and I have been to, water was offered at the drink stands or at Hydro Flask refilling stations throughout the parks. Cedar Point is different in this regard. We couldn't find any refill stations, and when we went to one of the drink stands to ask if we could refill our water bottles, we were told that we couldn't, that we'd have to buy refillable plastic bottles or buy the drinks in their provided paper cups. Now, don't take this as me complaining that we would have to spend a few bucks on a drink, but it seemed odd that in the middle of a heat wave, one Cedar Fair park announced that they had water available for free, and then another park in the same state essentially discouraged it and would make guests purchase it. I guess I'm mainly confused on the lack of consistency from park to park within the same chain. When we're at parks and they have frequent announcements going off about how there's free water available and that because of the heat, guests should stay hydrated, it does make us feel like the park does care, even if it is superficial. Moving on, most rides at the park do require lockers in some form or another, but some rides that you would expect require lockers, like Maverick, don't. More on that later. Other than that, restrooms are plentiful and easy to find, however it'd be nice if there were a few more throughout the park. There are some areas that have decently long stretches without any restrooms. On a final note, there are certain parts of the park that could probably use a bit more shade, namely the boardwalk area, but I can also understand why they don't entirely have this area covered, as it would block off a lot of the great views you can get of the rest of the park. I will admit I am being a bit generous here, but overall I'd rate the amenities at Cedar Point a 7 out of 10. Section 6, Food. The food offerings are some of the weakest aspects of this park, but I'm fairly certain that with the upcoming renovations, this will change drastically. Our experience at the time of visiting in 2021, however, was not the greatest. I swear, it seems like this park is great in many ways, but there are smaller factors about it that tend to weigh down the experience. The good thing is that there's plenty of food choices at the park, and even some nicer ones here and there, but it was somewhat difficult to find decent options. We didn't experience too much of a gut bomb with the food except for the pizza sold in Frontier Town near the town hall. We did also eat at the Mac Shack near the front of the park. This restaurant was essentially a Subway, but with mac and cheese. Katie was really excited about this one, and I wasn't. Safe to say, neither of us walked away from eating this being very impressed either. Overall, I'd rate the food at Cedar Point a 6.5 out of 10. Section 7, Staff. Again with the mixed bag of experiences, the staff. I can't completely blame Cedar Point on this one. Oh, wait, maybe I can. Our experience with the staff at Cedar Point was interesting. On some days we would get to the stations of rides and ride-ops would be hustling as hard as they could. There was a ton of energy and they were getting trains out of the station as fast as they could. Then there were other staff members, like in the gift shops, that looked like they couldn't care less. Some of them did seem like they didn't want to be there, and that's kinda sad. I know that Cedar Point has a somewhat unique challenge in that it can't fully rely on the local population for staff, but it still seemed odd to me that people look so unhappy at such an amazing place. I'm not sure if it was due to the conditions they were working in, or the potential low pay, or the hours, but I feel like there should be a way for Cedar Fair to take better care of its staff to ensure that they can be more comfortable and happy with their jobs. The one silver lining is that the staff working the popular rides like Steel Vengeance, Millennium Forest, Gatekeeper, and more did seem to be enjoying themselves. Overall, I'd rate the staff a 6.5 out of 10. Section 8, Coasters. The coasters that Cedar Point has combine to make arguably the best collection of coasters at any single theme park. Check out my Ranking the Rides video to see a breakdown on how, in my opinion, all the rides compare to each other. You've got height, speed, launches, inversions, and thrill. There really isn't much of a gap in the lineup of this park. With Steel Vengeance being one of the best coasters in the world, you can't beat what Cedar Point has. It will be very interesting to see how well the new Spinning Wild Mouse coaster fits into the lineup, and I'm definitely curious to see what happens to Top Thrill Dragster this year. After that, who knows what's next for Cedar Point? Will we see something 500 feet tall? Will Cedar Point break the inversion record? Or has their strategy changed completely? Only time will tell. Overall, I give the coasters at Cedar Point a 10 out of 10. Section 9, Flat Rides. Cedar Point has almost 20 flat rides. When Katie and I went, we didn't get a chance to experience many of the flat rides due to how crowded the park was. It was actually quite a challenge for us to ride everything that we did within the 3 days that it took for us to be at the park. This is why you need fast passes. There's nothing incredibly special in regards to flat rides here other than the fact that it has one of my new favorite rides, an S&S Scream and Swing. The drop in your stomach these give you as you hit the top of the swing and start to fall back down is an awesome feeling. It's such a simple experience but packs in a ton of thrill. Many of the other flat rides do appear to be well maintained, and there is a large variety here, including a giant Ferris wheel. Overall, I'd rate the flat rides at Cedar Point a 10 out of 10. Section 10, Operations. As I mentioned in the staff section, this was a slight mixed bag. On several occasions, we experienced ride crews that were working their hardest to get trains out of the stations as quick as they could. In other cases, like for the less popular rides, they weren't as quick. The biggest problem ride we had though was Maverick. During our visit, the line for this ride was never shorter than 2 hours, and the FastPass line also reached over an hour at many points throughout the day. The ride-ups were not slow for this ride, but there were seemingly a lot of factors that went into the slowness of the line for this ride, one of them being the storage situation. I'm not a huge fan of having lockers on rides, however I can appreciate that they do help speed things up greatly. I'm really surprised to see that Maverick doesn't require lockers. This just seemed odd to me. Many of the other less popular rides didn't have long lines and thus were able to dispatch fairly quickly. So overall, I'd rate the operations an 8.5 out of 10. Bringing it all together, I would say that Cedar Point is one of the best parks from a coaster collection point of view. The quality of this park is somewhat weighed down by its weaker aspects though. Some of these issues are being resolved with the construction of the new restaurants in the park, as well as improvements to staffing and compensation, but in my opinion, this park doesn't have the same quality as the other major Ohio theme park, Kings Island. This is not to say that this park is a bad experience. Katie and I had a ton of fun here and still made unforgettable memories along the way. Obviously, I still highly recommend going to this park as the coaster collection is unrivaled. Moving through the individual ratings of this park, I gave First Impressions a 10 out of 10, Theming a 7 out of 10, Immersion an 8 out of 10, Layout 9 out of 10, Amenities 7 out of 10, Food a 6.5 out of 10, Staff a 6.5 out of 10, the coasters a 10 out of 10, Flat Rides a 10 out of 10, and finally Operations an 8.5 out of 10, which averages out to about 8.25 out of 10. I will admit that in some areas I am being a bit generous with my rating system here. There were some negative experience we had with this park, but overall the positives do outweigh the negatives. So I feel like the overall score is an accurate representation of how we feel about Cedar Point as a whole. And who knows, maybe you agree. Thank you so much for watching this review of Cedar Point. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, feel free to leave a like and comment below and consider subscribing. I intend on uploading more content as time goes on and as Katie and I experience more parks and coasters. You can also find daily uploads on our Instagram page at Coaster Mania. Soon we'll be opening an Etsy page where you'll be able to buy prints and more of some of your favorite coaster photography of ours. Thanks for watching the video, and ride on, Coaster Maniacs.